Monday, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Startup School with Startup Canada and TruShield Insurance. Startup School is a program of Startup Canada Live, a monthly webinar series dedicated to the professional development of Canada's entrepreneurs and community leaders. My name is Catherine Forrest. I am the Communications, Marketing, and Government Relations Manager here at Startup Canada, and I'll be your host for today. Today's Startup School topic is all about home-based startups. We'll be talking to experts on starting up at home and some of the technical considerations entrepreneurs need to be aware of. Today's session is presented by TruShield Insurance, the place for small businesses and startups to get the insurance they need. So we will be jumping right into today's panel, but just a reminder to our audience that you can ask questions at any time throughout the hour using the YouTube comment section, as well as using the hashtag #StartupSchool on Twitter. So we do have an amazing panel joining us today. I'd like to welcome Mike Gaba, a small business advisor at TruShield Insurance. He's also an expert in property and casualty insurance. Welcome also to Edwin Frondozo, the growth and product manager at Slingshot VoIP, JF Ampromaz, a content strategy SEO and analytics consultant. We also have Wendy Mayhew, the CEO of Business Launch Solutions, and Elaine Orr, CEO of BalanceSheets.ca. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you to take a few minutes to introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Edwin.
Hey, thanks a lot, Catherine. I'm happy to be here. My name is Edwin Fandozo. I'm in charge of the CMO of Slingshot VoIP, just responsible for growth and marketing for our business across North America.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll also hand it over to Mike to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Mike Gaba. I'm a small business advisor at TruShield Insurance. I'm an expert in small business and entrepreneurial insurance. So if you have any questions, tweet them out, YouTube. You can feel free to ask me anything.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. And JF.
Hi, I'm JF Ampromaz, and I offer marketing consulting services for small businesses and startups.
Welcome. And Wendy.
Hi there, Wendy Mayhew, owner of Business Launch Solutions, and I'm going to take this opportunity to really tell you what I'm doing now. I'm working with seniorpreneurs, the fastest growing entrepreneurship demographic in the world, and I'm just launching a new website called WISE, which stands for We Have the Wisdom, the Initiative, the Skills, and the Experience to Become Really Awesome Entrepreneurs.
I love it. It's a wonderful space to be working in right now.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Elaine.
Hi, I'm Elaine Orr. I'm the CEO and owner of BalanceSheets.ca, and we do accounting and bookkeeping for all different sizes of businesses. And so we see people go through startup where they just cleared a corner of their kitchen table and started a business until they've incorporated and hired staff, and that's a very exciting space to be in too.
Fantastic, yes. So excited to have all of you here, some wonderful entrepreneurs across different sectors working from home. So I know that we'll get some really good tips and insights and a good conversation going today about starting up at home. So our first question, we'll start off with some general questions about what it's like to work from home. So I'm going to ask each one of you can jump in as you wish, but we'll start with Elaine. And can you tell us what the best and worst parts about starting up and working from home are?
So I have an interesting story in that I started working from home. I literally did clear a corner of my kitchen table, buy a laptop, buy a copy of QuickBooks, and start working. But I'm finding space and time to work and not letting the days, just the realities of life kick in was very difficult at the start, just having to be disciplined. You really have to be disciplined if you're going to work at home and not let neighbors drop by. You have to educate your friends. You have to educate other people that yes, you're at home, yes, your car's in the driveway, but you're absolutely working. And what's interesting about my story is that I grew, I incorporated, I hired staff, we moved out and got an office, and thanks to the innovation in accounting technology and how everything has moved to the cloud, we've actually all gone back home to our home offices.
I like that twist in the story there.
It is, you know, and we haven't lost any productivity. We've all been working from home a year now, and one of the biggest cloud accounting firms in Canada, LiveCA, only has people work remotely.
Wow.
So, but we've learned some skills about the discipline and things like that now, so we're much better at working from home probably than I used to be anyway.
Well, we definitely have some more questions about that discipline angle later on, so I'll definitely come back to you on that. It's a really good point about the neighbors. You know, you've got your car in your driveway, so all those distractions that can come in, but we'll talk about how we can manage those as well later on. So thank you so much. Wendy, do you want to build on best and worst parts from working from home?
Sure. So I love working from home, even though sometimes I do wish I did have an office because it is isolation. I work by myself. I don't have, I have advisors now, which is great, and I am going to be going out and having meetings with them all the time. But I think the biggest thing is the isolation and not having somebody that you can throw things around with. I mean, my head just explodes all day long with all of these ideas, and it's really me making those decisions. So. The isolation, it's also, as Elaine says, the distractions, of educating your friends and whatnot. And I am in a little bit even different situation, whereas my office is at the front of the house, and I have a window, and I watch my friends go out golfing or lunch, or whatever, and I'm sitting there, and I'm going, okay, I made the decision to work, so that's the cross I have to bear.
That's a tough one, seeing the golf games.
Yeah, it is, and they asked me to go. Oh, I can't.
Well, we'll talk a little bit later about how you can, separate that work and life balance when you're working from home. So I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah, sure.
And Jeff, do you want to add, your experiences, best and worst parts of your startup experience at home?
A lot of common points here in the sense that I started off in the same desk that I've done most of my assignments as a university student at, and it's a fascinating way to do things, but at the same time, it's the only one I know. I haven't really spent much time in other people's. I don't really do traditional workplaces for more than a day or a couple days of training or meetings. Yeah, it's for me. It's kind of weird to comment on it because I can't contrast as well as somebody who's been back and forth as much. But I like hearing everybody's opinion. Especially Elaine had an interesting story about being on both sides of that.
Yeah, maybe I'll let you lead into our next question. Is actually, how do you know if starting a home-based business is right for you? Why was it right for you?
So I did it because kind of my first form of employment was freelance writing, and that became a full-time thing. So at that point, it was just kind of there, and it was happening, in my living room. So when I, finally was able to get out of an apartment and into a house, I really made it a point to have an office and have an office where I could have clients come in and meet me. And that's an advantage, but I've really found the division of space is great. So it's for you. What the things that have made me successful, like other people have said, are the ability to be disciplined and to work when it's tempting to not work, the ability to set boundaries with other people and tell them that you're working. So those are probably two key things you're going to either need to get started or need to develop quickly.
Yeah, and that leads me to another question around bringing clients home. So what kind of setup do you have to have at home to make it an environment where it's appropriate to bring your clients over?
So I am not the best housekeeper, which means that I have a powder room down here for a half bath for clients that need to use the bathroom while they happen to be by. I have appropriate parking. The part of the my office is essentially the whole first floor of my house. So that needs to be kept neat and tidy. I mean, think of the offices that you've been to where you felt those people were credible, right? And you know, you've got to be up to those standards. Otherwise, you should probably be using a rented meeting space or a co-working space.
Yeah.
And then I know that later in the in the hour here, Mike is going to talk more about the fact that if somebody slips and falls in your stairs and they're not a friend but a client who's visiting you, your normal insurance will not deal with that. So there's definitely a concern on that side as well.
Yes, definitely. That's a great point, and that's something that we're going to touch on, as you said, with Mike in the later half of this program. So I'm going to push it over to Edwin. We haven't heard from you yet. I'd like to know what are your best and worst parts of starting up, and how you knew that it was right for you to work from home.
Thank you. So the best and worst part, I think the best part of working from home, and I've been self-employed over 10 years now, is just that opportunity to do things that I want to do, whether it's running in the morning or meeting friends when meeting friends for lunch or taking even a nap or a siesta. Also, at the same flip side, as everyone said, that's probably the worst part as well because you got to be disciplined as well. But I mean, a little closer to home or closer to now, the best and worst thing is actually I'm a new father, so I have a 3-week-old daughter, so I love being at home, and sort of it pulls me away from the computer to take care of the baby. But that's probably the best thing in life, working from home, having that ability to take care and be a new father and have that time. But I don't think it's easy as well because I've been self-employed for so long, so I built that discipline where I could sort of shut off the work and just be with family time as well. So it's a good struggle, and I love it, and I probably wouldn't want the other way as well. So that's it. I guess the second part of that question was when it's right for you to work from home. And that's the difficult question. I'm going to assume that.
Can I just? Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, where it's a little bit hard to hear you. Could you just maybe fix your mic for a quick second? I think it might just be. Yeah, you're good.
Can you hear me now?
It's a bit better. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, no, that's so. In terms of knowing when to work from home, I think it comes to the question: do you want to be self-employed, and what are you going to make a change in your life to actually do that? And starting from home gives you no excuses, no barriers. All you need is a computer. I think Elaine said it. You need a laptop, and you need the key essential softwares. And right now it's email, website, maybe Twitter, and really you can get started and start selling. So it all starts with you and knowing when you want to jump in, because there's no excuse. You can work from home. You can work from Starbucks down the street. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd just like to jump in there and say, Edwin, I really like what you said about, you have a child now, and it's great. Whenever I first started having my own business, I worked from home, and I had 2 young ones, and I was able to be there before school and after school and any events. They didn't have to go to daycare all the time. I was there if they were ill. It was great. It was awesome. But then they grew up and moved away.
Well,
didn't need me anymore.
Well, hopefully she doesn't grow up that fast.
No, that was many years ago. But it was that's how I started doing it, was because of having the kids, and it was great being there for them.
Oh, 100%. So I mean, it's a new challenge of being an entrepreneur with having a child. So I'm relishing the opportunity. So it's been good so far.
Yeah, good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pass it over to Mike. You're going to talk quite a bit more later on in the broadcast, but I wanted to see if you could give us a bit of a heads up on how you know if starting a home-based business is right for you from an insurance perspective.
From an insurance perspective, ultimately I think what you need to do, and I'll talk more about this later, but ultimately what you need to do is assess the exposures that you might have in terms of property that's business owned, and liability in terms of people coming to your house or not, and really try and find that line in the sand where the house insurance stops and the business insurance should start. But yeah, we'll get maybe a little bit more to that later. But I think what's also really important is I do work quite a bit from home in my current role, and I think it's really important to have the mindset that you're going to need to be flexible. Like last night, I shut it down at around midnight, just ultimately because my 2 kids went to bed and my wife went to bed. We're expecting our third, and ultimately I had some free time there, so I jumped on it. I think time management is crucial because as you work from home, there's only going to be more priorities, so you need to be able to categorize those properly. And I think lastly, JF said it the best. I think you need to set some boundaries, just in terms of when you're working. It's as nice as it is for your kids to come and want to see mama or dada. They have to know, and your spouse has to be comfortable with treating you like you're not actually at home. So I'd say those 3 pieces are probably really important to the puzzle.
Yes, that's a really, really good point about boundaries and that discipline, and just making sure that everyone in the household is on the same page as you with regards to your availability and things like that. So that's always a juggle when you've got a family at home, but that's something that we'll get more into as we go along. So how about Elaine? What are some of the personality traits that one has to have to be successful as a startup entrepreneur from home?
Absolutely self-discipline. You have to have self-discipline. If you're a procrastinator, if you can't manage your own boundaries, and then you probably won't be very successful at working from home. You really have to be a self-starter, because there's that alarm, you have to set it and you have to get up every morning just as if you were going out to work in an office. But one of the biggest things about self-discipline is when I was first working at home, I worked until midnight. I had supper with the family. I made supper for the family, and I came back into my office and I started work again. I worked evenings. I worked weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my family were older by then, and nobody was really, as long as they got supper, nobody really cared that much. But now, since my second, last and final evolution working from home, because I'm not going back out to an office again. I'm definitely not. I'm much more disciplined about it. I have regular hours. I get up the same time every morning. I work 5 days a week. I'll do evening things like with Startup Canada or networking events or things like that. But I don't answer client emails, no matter how much unless it's an urgent thing. If somebody emails me at the weekend and I get it on my phone, if somebody emails me in the evening or asks me something, it can wait. It can wait until tomorrow. So that self-discipline goes 2 ways: the self-discipline to start and the self-discipline to stop. Both really important.
Yes. So was there a turning point for you when you realized that you had to make that shift from going from working until midnight to actually putting those hard stops at 5 o'clock in the weekend time to yourself?
Well, really, I made that shift when I went out to work in an office, right? And we had an office space with 3 or 4 people at the time in the office. And it was real clear, defined, and it was a good reminder for me to see just driving home when work stopped. And one of the things that I do quite often now is when I get up in the morning, I'll get out and I'll go to the local coffee shop and I'll have my coffee there for half an hour in the morning. And then when I come back to my own space, it feels like I've gone out and I've started work.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. You could walk the dog, you could do whatever it is, but it takes that. But I don't go just from bed straight through to my office to work.
Something to get you out of the house, kind of get that kickstart for the day, and then you're ready to work.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I want to encourage all of the panelists to, jump in as they wish and kind of build on each other's ideas. But JF, I'm interested in hearing from your perspective what kind of personality traits are essential for starting up at home, since you have done it since very early in your career.
So yeah, I'd say that before things that are like, it depends on the kind of work you want to do. There's a lot of if it's the kind of work that's best done with long stretches of non-interruption, that's very helpful. So like management is something that often requires a lot of interaction, whereas a lot of kind of more technical or content generation type jobs require quite a bit of interaction, but they also require a high portion of uninterrupted hours. So if you're predisposed to that kind of work, if that's the work you kind of enjoy doing in your education, that's a good sign. If you find that in your normal work environment you resent a lot of interruption, versus that's another sign that home base might be right for you. And I think, again, the discipline both ways, and you asked Elaine if there'd been a specific moment. For me, there really was, in the set. Like, I had the classic kind of, I don't know, some kind of burnout scenario, and really had to rethink the kind of hours I was putting into what I was doing and what I wanted, what I wanted to get, not just out of my business, but out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that became a lot of decision making. And now I work, now unless there's an emergency, I work 8-hour days with a 1-hour lunch. And if there's something I want to do on a week, like, I'll trade shifts with myself. So if I'm working on a weekend, it's because I know that I'm taking a day off in a week nearby. Because, like, the other thing is, everybody works kind of cruddy jobs starting out, and everybody doesn't have what they want to get out of their job as much starting out. And because the self-starter, the business owner, all these other traits that we have to help us get our business off the ground, it's hard to know when you've kind of paid your dues. And if you notice that all of your friends are no longer working night shifts and they're getting weekends off, that's a good sign to you that maybe you can look at your relationships with your clients, look at how much work you're taking on, look at your rates, and see what you can do about carving out the standard of living that's commensurate with your education and years of experience.
I love a lot of what you just said there. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that's been helpful, and just to add on to the discipline and the timing, one key thing that I know helps is actually prioritizing, because as an entrepreneur you have 1,000,003 things to do. Not only do you have to deal with customers, you have to do emails, you got to do social media, you got to, if you're a one-man shop, you're doing everything. So it's also prioritizing the long-term goals, because as any entrepreneur knows, and you probably know a handful of friends or colleagues that you work with, you always question, why didn't you do that? Oh, I don't have time, I don't do this. And it might be the one key thing that you have to do, for example, implementing a process or a CRM, or how come you don't have a CRM? Oh, I don't have time to do that. So I read a book earlier this year. It was called The One Thing, and basically it was this focus get one main thing done during the day, and usually that's in the morning, and it's usually a long-term project, something that will take longer, because it's easy to get trapped doing busy work, going on social media. I know myself, I get onto social media, and I really dive deep, and I really share things, and I also deal with a lot of marketing. But doing long-term planning, long-term goals is really putting that time and understanding the priorities, right? So not getting trapped in that.
Yeah, I love that tactic as well, doing that having that one major priority for the day, and especially, as you say, getting that done in the morning, and that opens up the rest of your day. You're already feeling accomplished and ready to go for the afternoon. I love it. And I also really liked what JF was saying about trading shifts. That's not really a concept that you hear talked about much with entrepreneurs, especially when you're working, alone a lot of the time. But it's a really great concept to consider. You're not giving yourself a day off; you're actually giving yourself time in lieu, kind of thing. So I really like that. And I know Rochelle is in the other room tweeting out these awesome tips. But Wendy, did you want to add to that conversation on the kind of personality traits that are important for starting up at home?
Yeah, I'm a workaholic. I do have a problem. My day starts by, I get up, I make my cup of tea, and I come in, I turn on my computer, and I go through all my emails and everything. And I'm much more productive in the morning than I am in the afternoon. And so in the afternoon, at the end of the day, I do my priority list for the next day. But I will pop in and out of my office in the evening quite a bit. I try not to, because my husband is retired. And I do take my breaks and my lunch with him, and actually some days we go out and sit outside, especially in the summer, and have a cocktail and just talk about what each other did during the day. And I do, in the summer, I don't work Fridays if I can help it. That's my day off. But you know, as I said to my husband a couple of weekends ago, whenever it was pouring rain, I love rainy days because I just get so much more done. And there is a disadvantage of having a window in your office. I'm telling you, I'm looking outside now, and it's pretty nice out there, and I'm sitting in here. But as Elaine said, you have to be disciplined. You have to want to do this. If you're not disciplined, and you know, and you have to keep the distractions away. You know, it's so easy to get distracted and you know, just, oh well, I'll do that tomorrow, or I can do this, and then things don't happen, and then all of a sudden you're really overwhelmed because the things that you're supposed to do you didn't do.
So that leads me into my next question. So we've talked a little bit about these tactics to stay disciplined, but do you have any, you know, really concrete tips that haven't been mentioned so far on how to manage those distractions and to keep concentrated throughout the day?
I just do it. I just know that what I want to do is important, or what I am doing is important, and in order for it to happen, I have to sit here and I have to do it because nobody else is doing it. It is just me. I am very fortunate that, even though I said earlier about, you know, I look out the window and I see my friends and my neighbors doing this and that and the other thing, they are all very, very respectful of my time, and so they don't take away from me. The one thing that I find really funny is my kids. They're adults, but they will call me during the day, and they'll say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working." And they go, "Oh yeah, well, what else do you do, Mom?" But yet they don't understand that I work during the day, and so do they. But they're in you know, they work in restaurants, and so their shifts are different than mine. So they kind of expect me to be on the same time frame or time, you know, as they are. So that's the only thing that I find really, really strange. And I will always answer the phone whenever my kids call. So that is the one distraction that I will live with.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the panel to see if there are any further concrete tips that you have for people who, yes, it's about the passion and being in it and knowing that you want to do it and be there. But you know, people still get distracted. So what are some concrete tips that you can offer to our listeners to stay concentrated when there are, when you're at a home environment, you're a bit more relaxed and there are some more distractions?
I think having a separate workspace is very important. Having a door. I need a door.
That's a really good point.
I've discovered I like a flight of stairs.
Ah.
Like a flight of stairs.
If possible.
That is great, having a door and a flight of stairs.
But make sure your door doesn't have glass in it. Go ahead.
I was going to say I have actually one tip that I implemented probably 5 years ago is an autoresponder to say when I'm going to reply to email. So I reply, I think I used to say 11 and 5 p.m., but now I say within 4 business hours. So it took me a while actually to teach myself not to check email and to be okay with not replying right away. But it level sets everyone that's emailing you and that you're actually busy and doing things as well. That really implementing that sort of annoyed people at first, but they started to respect it, right? And I also tell them where to go if they need help. That was one good tip I could share. Another tip I was going to share, and I think you mentioned, Catherine, was there's many distractions, but I'd like to argue that there's probably as many distractions working in an office or even more. Yeah. You have people who could pop over a cubicle and say, hey, what's up? Let's go for a coffee. Hey, let's go for a lunch break. And then it's 4 p.m. So I'm not too sure that there's more distractions at home than there is in an office or a co-working space.
Yeah, that's a great point. Very good point.
Yeah, you know what? If I could, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Like from my office perspective, I actually like having my office with a window like right onto a reasonably busy street because it makes it feel like the kind of low level of activity going on, the fact that there's people kind of going about their business makes me feel like it's a workspace more appropriate. So I think there's some degrees of preferences there that are gonna go back and forth, but I think that's the real perk of the home-based workspace is you can totally you build it to what suits your work habits and what's going to make you the most effective.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mike, did you have something to add there as well?
Yeah, you know what? A mentor of mine a couple years ago had It just basically told me to write on a piece of paper the question, why am I not doing what I know I should be doing? And then to post that kind of in front of my face throughout the workday where I know I'm going to be looking at it. So if I find myself on Facebook or doing something like that, that's not going to be getting me towards my goals in the end, I can ask myself that question and then kind of get right back on track.
I love that.
That's going on the inside of my glasses.
Yeah, I like that, yeah. A little sticky note on my computer with that.
Yeah, we have a quote board here at the office, so I think that might be tomorrow's quote. I like it. So I just want to remind everyone who's listening that you do have the opportunity to ask questions via Twitter using the hashtag #StartupSchool. We've already talked a bit about how you separate workspace from home space, how to manage distractions, how to stay focused and concentrated. And now we're going to move a bit closer to the technical side of things with our home-based businesses. And I'm going to start with Mike. Can you name what some of the common misconceptions around insurance requirements are for home-based startups?
Yeah, you know what, I think the most common would be most people assume that because they are working out of their home that their house insurance is going to cover a loss that's business related, and or I guess a common misconception is that there are no exposures if you have a business out of your home. So I think those are the two, but it doesn't necessarily need to be complicated. I mean, assuming that everybody has a homeowner's or a renter's policy, I mentioned it's important to find out where that coverage stops and where the business coverage should begin. So how I would do it, basically, I would have a piece of paper and I would put down 2 columns. One column I would write property, and then I would make a note of everything business owned. It could be from one computer to several computers or cameras if you're a photographer or software. Basically, just write down everything that the business owns, and then try and put a dollar value to it to replace it. And then on the other side of the paper, I'd write liability. And then that basically covers everything that isn't necessarily your property, but is connected to your business. I guess it's really important just to be able to try and identify some exposures. So on the liability side, JF mentioned, if somebody's coming to your house and they slip and fall, would that be covered by our house insurance? I guess the question is, it depends on every insurer, but the answer might surprise you if you end up asking your insurer, because that is an exposure that business insurance is specifically designed to cover. Mm-hmm.
And can you give some examples of what some of these risks or exposures might be for a home-based business? So you mentioned, falling down the stairs or slipping down the stairs. What else should people keep in mind?
Okay. Well, on the property side, I mean, there's always the risk of fire. Like you've invested in your property, you have some nice computers or you have some inventory at your house. There's always the possibility of a fire breaking out and it being destroyed. You've also got the risk of taking things off site. So I'll pick on photographers today, but they tend to have more expensive equipment on the road with them. They might have 1 or 2, sometimes 3 cameras. This can add up to several $1,000s, and knock on wood, if that ever went missing or got damaged while it was away from your house, that's an entirely different exposure than it being at your house as well. So you have that aspect of it. And then on the liability side, what you have to do is think about what your product is designed to do, and then think about not just if it fails to do what it's supposed to do, but if it actually causes harm. So let's say you find a wholesaler who's selling these widgets, and they're very competitively priced, and you figure you can make some money retailing these, even if it's out of your home. And let's just say the product, hurts somebody, or let's say the widget happens to be electrical in nature, or you plug it into the wall and it, burns somebody's house down. Knock on wood. I mean, these are actual exposures that people face, and these are the reasons why people buy insurance. So I think what's really important is to really identify, like I said before, where your house insurance stops, because it's really meant to cover, a person living in their house versus running a business with those added exposures.
And TruShield Insurance, of course, is a great place to go to find out more about that, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But I actually want to open it up to the panelists to, you know, whether or not you have a startup insurance story that you could share that the rest of us could learn from, you know, with regards to starting up at home. If you have any lessons on the insurance side for some of our entrepreneurs listening. I'll open that up to anybody.
Thankfully, out of all the businesses that I deal with, many of whom work from home, I haven't had anyone who has had that kind of issue, but everybody I know, they do pay their insurance, and I can see, if I were to see in their chart of accounts that insurance were missing, then I would be able to point that out to them. But as Mike was saying, like, you might think that because I don't meet clients at my home anymore, I used to, but I don't do that anymore. There's no need for it now with the technology and everything. We can Skype, we can screen share, we can send things back and forward, you know, and if we want to, I prefer to go meet them at their place of business. But you would think that I might not need that kind of business insurance then, but Mike makes a good point about if, like, the technology that I use for my business, if there was a fire and that was just, you know, to list the items that I have that are purely business related, then that's still the reason why I need it, even though, like, liability might not seem like a large part of it, then just actually having materials that I would want to claim is a good reason for me to need it as well.
Yeah, certainly. Edwin, did you want to, you know, build upon that concept and about, you know, some misconceptions that you may have had about insurance requirements for your home startup?
The only thing I wanted to add, or even actually ask Mike to clarify, I know I had colleagues talk about when you're self-employed or you're independent, there's an insurance. I can't think of it. Basically if something happens to you accidentally and your income gets compromised because of your injury, say you're snowboarding and you can't do anything or something happens, and there's an insurance, I forgot the name, and Mike will probably chime in, we will cover your income until you come back as well from that. That's the only story I always heard when I was starting out on my own, was get an insurance that covers your income when you can't actually work.
Yeah, Edwin, that's absolutely fantastic advice. Frankly, what you're touching upon is called disability insurance, and with property and liability insurance, what you're covering, if you want to look at it this way, you have the goose and then you have the golden eggs. So with property and liability insurance, you're covering the golden eggs, but with disability insurance, you're really covering the goose because you're the one that's driving the business and driving the revenue. So disability insurance is definitely crucial for self-employed people who are relying on themselves on a day-to-day basis to make some money.
I had a more basic situation, actually. We were able to recover some money where we had essentially an event space and a co-working space where we lost income because of a pipe freezing, and we just couldn't, you know, like, we didn't have the plumbing facilities needed to run normally. And so I think one big thing about business income, business insurance that doesn't get dealt with in home insurance is the loss of space. So Mike would definitely know more about that, but the idea that if your house burns down and your office is in your house, in addition to the stuff that was in your office, you now don't have an office to work from. And, you know, where are you going to meet clients or do your work is another form of insurance that falls under one of the things that business insurance covers that home-based definitely or almost never does.
Yeah, for sure. Quick story. I actually had a loss at my house. My dishwasher flooded my place, and you know, sure enough, we had insurance. We got set up at a hotel, but then ultimately the question was, okay, now where am I going to work? So yeah, being able to get set up somewhere else is definitely a huge part of the coverage for sure.
Or just on even on a temporary basis, if you can't use your place and you need to grab a co-working space for a few meetings or a flex office for a few meetings or something, then it might, depending on how big a flex office and for how long, you may or may not want to bother making the claim. But even in those situations, it's good to know that there's a fallback if something extreme happens.
Yeah, that's a twofold answer. So you have the business income that you may have lost. Now, if you're working from home, that may not be a lot compared to a retail location. So let's use Tim Hortons for example. That it goes up, and they're going to lose a lot of money because clients aren't necessarily visiting them anymore. So being portable and say working from your laptop or your computer, you don't necessarily have a huge exposure there, but what you do have an exposure for is, like you said, losing your office space, not having a place to work, and needing to pay additional money to get up and running somewhere else. So the insurance should cover both.
So Mike, can you talk a little bit more about some of the legal barriers that could inhibit entrepreneurs from starting up at home?
Legally speaking, that's a fantastic question. I wish I was a lawyer for this one, but I don't know if I have a really fantastic answer for you. In terms of insurance, kind of comes down to are you really covering your exposures properly? From a legal standpoint, the only thing I can really say would be, some communities do have rules in place in terms of stratas. If you live in a strata or you have a homeowners association, sometimes they do limit home-based business. But that's really all I got for you for that question.
No, that's great. Do any of the other panelists want to weigh in on some of the legal aspects of starting up at home?
Your community may have bylaws on the signage front is one that can come up, and the other one is how many people are coming to your house in appropriate parking. So if you've got like 2 employees and 2 clients showing up for a meeting and you're using up like a lot of street parking on a regular basis, there might be a bylaw that your neighbors can cause some trouble for you on. Signage can be surprisingly problematic in that I've known people who put up pretty modest signs and, a neighbor took umbrage with it. And really that's kind of, it's the same thing. A home-based business is essentially you're now a neighbor on 2 fronts. So, and much like it's good to be a good neighbor, and these, it's not just nice, but these people are around you and you're going to live with them for a long time. Now you are even more public facing. So your ability to be a good neighbor as a home-based business owner is more than twice as has more than linearly scaled, is more than twice as important than your ability to be a good neighbor as a homeowner.
Mm-hmm. Very, very important considerations. Edwin or Wendy or Elaine, do you want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to be saying the same as the JF, that it's the signage and the bylaws. I mean, if somebody does report you, even if you don't have a sign out front, there are some areas that you have to get a permit, and if somebody finds you don't have a permit and somebody knows what you're doing, they just want to be a rotten person, they can go in and cause you a lot of pain that way. Signage, I would never put signage outside of my home. There's somebody down the street from us, actually doesn't even work from home, but he has a business outside of the community, and he has a big A-frame, a big ugly A-frame sitting on his lawn. So I appreciate what I'm doing here with, we have to respect each other. We want to all be good neighbors. Fortunately, he's not my neighbor. He's down on another street, so somebody else can deal with that one.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add as well, I don't know if it was a bylaw, and this is a personal experience with JF. What JF was saying is that when we originally started beta testing or even doing the concept of a cloud-based system, we actually had servers and in my partner's basement, and we had a T3 pipe, which is a thick internet pipe at the time, going there, and the neighbors were questioning us. They even sent the City of Toronto officials to come to check what we were running in the basement because of the electricity spike, and maybe we're doing something fishy in the basement. So it's
you gotta grow up.
Well, I didn't want to say that, but that's what people were thinking in the neighborhood here. So
that was not the right way to answer the door. What are you doing in the basement? We have a high growth operation. Yeah.
Hey, well, all we have is 10 computers. Leave us alone. So I don't know if that was anything legal or not legal. I just thought it just came to my mind when I was hearing about when JF mentioned about the parking and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's almost the thing. Like you want to like have that, like have a barbecue and tell people what you do, or have an open house and just to like let people know what's going on over there.
Part of your communication strategy.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to throw that big keg party back in college, you go to the neighbors and invite them at least, right? So you're doing a more grown-up, responsible version of that. So.
Yeah. And if I were your accountant, I would allow you that keg as a business deduction.
I believe it's 50, right? It's a 50% meals and entertainment, right? So
that's right, 50%. Yeah, 50%.
Okay, I got to go and arrange my party. Okay, guys. You're all invited.
Don't forget to invite your neighbors.
No.
Well, I do have one follow-up question from our one of our listeners on Twitter, and they ask if there are different considerations if your home-based business actually runs from a room in your apartment building. Is it different? Are there different considerations that you have to take into account versus owning your own home and renting in an apartment building? Does anyone? I think Edwin, you're in an apartment, aren't you?
It's a great question. I'm not sure I know what the answer is because I do rent as well. But I have the same business coverage and everything that I need. So I never thought to consider whether it was rent or personal. I mean, the only difference is I'll get rental insurance for the place, for the property, right? So I'm not too sure. Mike might know actually more than that. So.
Yeah, Mike, do you want to chime in there?
It's not really going to make a difference in terms of the insurance coverage, but it could definitely make a difference in terms of what you're allowed to do in that space.
Right, on the legal side of things. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to move things along. So our next question is about errors and omissions insurance. So what is it, and why should a startup have it?
Okay, so I'm guessing that one's going to me, or does anybody else have anything they want to add to that first?
Mike, we'll start with you, and then we can open it up. Yeah.
No, for sure. Okay, so with errors and omissions, so I kind of touched upon property and liability before, and there's actually about 2 or 3 other really important coverages as well that you need to assess whether you have an exposure there or not. But errors and omissions coverage, it might be easier to talk first about I'll do 2 scenarios basically. So let's say you're an interior designer and you hire some subcontractors, and they redo a layout in the home, and at some point the house burns down as a result of them working on it. The general liability is going to kind of run in there and cover the house, like the physical damage. I'll give you a second scenario now. Let's say you're an interior designer, same scenario, and the homeowner says, during this renovation, I'd really like the floors to be warm all year round. They're ice cold, it's in the basement, I live in a cold climate. And, they finish the work and it all looks great, but then winter rolls around and it ultimately, the floors are cold. And then they come back to you and sure enough, the product you recommended based on your expertise, they went with it, isn't the right product for the floor. Now there's no damage, so the general liability policy isn't going to respond. So the errors and omissions policy would cover you for your professional expertise in that scenario. So if at the end of the day the homeowner had to go into the basement, rip the floor out, redo the heated floor, and then redo the floor, the errors and omissions would be designed to cover that. Whereas if you didn't have the errors and omissions, there's really nothing guaranteeing or ensuring that your expertise is going to be proper at that point.
And would that type of insurance be mostly for particular types of entrepreneurs, or is it recommended for, across sector?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to the exposure that you have, and this is going to be different for every business, but I think each person, each entrepreneur is going to know exactly to what extent people are relying on their expertise to kind of customize each job and each product. So if I'll talk about interior designers again, they're really relying on the interior designer to do a big portion of the work. So they would have an exposure there. If you're simply, selling shoes, not so much of an errors and omissions and exposure there.
Right. So over to our panelists. Do you have that type of insurance, and do you find it valuable? I'll start with Edwin.
A, I do not. B, funny enough, I learned about E&O insurance hosting startup chats with TruShield, and I was like, wow, that's an amazing insurance. and it really makes sense for a lot of businesses, and it's sort of the benefit of being part of the Startup Chats community. I really learned a lot, and I did actually look into it as well, so I don't have it.
So perhaps it's one of those things that needs a bit more of awareness around.
Oh, 100%. I mean, even for consultants or technical consultants, like I remember being on the chat, someone was mentioning if you're an IT consultant and maybe your client's infrastructure went down and they lost millions of dollars, they could actually go back and blame you for that because you didn't provide the service you needed to, or whatever your SLA was. And then if you didn't have E&O, then you're sort of SOL.
Yeah.
That's acronyms, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Elaine, have you had any experience with E&O insurance?
Yes, of course. It's a very important insurance to have in the accounting business. Although we may have all sorts of, notice to readers, and this is the unaudited, and we're only providing all these figures. Based on what the client has given us, we do provide advice, but we try as often as possible to issue a disclaimer and say, that ultimately, in all our engagement letters, we say that if a client goes ahead and is doing anything fraudulent at all, we're not involved in that, and that we're not covered by it. But our it's such an important industry to have errors and omission insurance. And wouldn't you agree, Mike, that this is one of the most important industries to have it in?
For sure. I mean, you're an expert. You know what you're doing. Clients are coming to you to really handle their business. So it's definitely a huge industry that, I mean, if you're in that industry, you should definitely have that covered.
Yeah, certainly. And I think Startup Canada and TruShield Insurance will, after this webinar, do a bit more work to get the word out about that type of insurance, considering Edwin's comment there. So, Mike, another question for you. Do different types of startups need different types of insurance? We touched on that, briefly earlier, but on a broader scale, what's the scoop there?
Yeah, to answer your question, each startup is definitely going to have their own unique exposures, but the nice thing is, because I know entrepreneurs don't have enough to worry about, if they do have somebody that's knowledgeable, like somebody who has expertise and is a professional in the industry, they're going to be able to take all the different exposures that you have, simplify it, and then be able to kind of break it down in a really general way for you to be able to understand how the policy is going to kind of encompass your overall exposure. So if you take the exercise where you take the property, you take your liability, kind of the areas that things could go sideways, then you bring that to a professional. They should be able to look at that and then bring some more insight to it and really simplify it for you. So it shouldn't be time consuming, but you should definitely have somebody professional look at it who has errors and omissions insurance.
Mm-hmm. And so, where do you suggest entrepreneurs go to get that information? I know at TruShield you've got quite a few resources, so perhaps you can direct some of our listeners to some of those resources.
Right. In terms of resources, I mean, the internet's going to provide a certain level of knowledge, but I guess I'm kind of old school in this sense, where I still feel like talking with somebody is going to provide the best level of comprehensiveness. So I was just going to a professional.
So that should be one of your first steps when you're starting up at home is going to see your insurance professional.
Yeah, and you know what? Just to add one more thing, I think with insurance, you have a lot of things to worry about when you're starting a business, and insurance is kind of one of those things where it sometimes is easier to maybe put your head in the sand and maybe not try and think about what could go wrong, but I guarantee that you're definitely better off to be prepared for something that doesn't happen than to be not prepared for something that does. So that small step beginning with a professional, it can go a long way for your business and your family if something ultimately does go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I find, in the communications line of work that a lot of the time when we're talking about this, that it takes a big shocker story to kind of get people scared into taking on something like this insurance as a startup cost. So I'm be interested to hear from the rest of the panelists to see if they have any further startup stories or experiences of starting up at home and how insurance coverage has either benefited or a lack of it has hindered their business?
Actually, it was Edwin reminded me of something that I had major injuries almost 2 years ago, and I didn't have any disability insurance.
And what was that?
I had major injuries 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I ended up in hospital. I ended up in a wheelchair. I had a concussion, and I didn't have disability insurance.
Oh my goodness.
Thankfully, I had staff, and the staff kept things going. But if that had been just a year earlier when I didn't have staff, I wouldn't have anything. And even with the staff, you know, I mean, my income definitely suffered from not having disability insurance. So, yes, I wish I had thought of that as part of my startup costs, but I didn't, and that was very foolish of me.
But now somebody else will learn from that mistake.
Yes, now please go learn from that mistake, because it can happen to anybody. It really can. It can happen in the blink of an eye.
Yes, exactly. It's always the unexpected.
Yeah.
So, JF, what about...
Sorry, yeah, it was how coincident. I was just wanted to add something. Is on the E&O insurance front is there are certain professional designations, certifications, organizations, and you'll also find there are certain projects that, like RFPs, that if you want to make that bid, you need to have XYZ dollars of E&O insurance. So, like for instance, if you want to be a Google Analytics certified partner, in addition to experienced number of employees that have completed this much training, so on and so forth, you have to have $1 million of liability insurance, or sorry, of E&O insurance, because that's, and a lot of people, like a lot of government contracts and things like that, well, that's the requirement, right? They want to know that if they sue you, you're going to have money to pay if something goes wrong, and they want that requirement.
Yeah, that's exactly. Wendy, do you want to add any last thoughts before we wrap things up?
I have insurance, and I'm going to be quite honest. I would have to go back and look at my policy because I don't know what all it includes right now. It is part of. It's called an umbrella insurance with our home, and so yeah, I better go and check on all of this because you never know, right? So that's so go and check your home. If you think you have it, go and check and make sure that you have everything.
Have an expert read it over.
Yes.
What was that?
Have an expert read it over.
Right, exactly. Somebody from TruShield.
Yeah. Well, we are just about out of time, so I'm going to ask each of you to, chime in if you have any last tips for entrepreneurs who are thinking of or just getting started with their home-based business. So I'll do a quick roundtable, and Wendy, since we're on you, we'll start with you.
Okay. So when you're starting out, I always say whenever you're starting a business, it's a process, and whether you're at home or not, but make sure that you look at everything that you need to do, like your insurance, your legal, everything else. So, but in particular, you do need to look at insurance. I mean, so many people overlook this, and it's just as Elaine said, look at what she went through, and you just never know what's going to happen. So go talk to an expert. Again, as Mike says, it's better than talk to a person instead of looking at it on the internet, because you really need that expertise. To make sure that you're getting the right insurance to suit you working whatever you're doing from home. And the one thing that I always say too, just as being a home-based business, when you're talking about liability, I don't bring, or very, very seldom does anyone come to my home. I always make sure that I meet them outside of the home, and that's for a couple of reasons. Some people think, and I don't know why they're still like this, but if you work from home, you're really not a professional, and so I like to get out. I like to go in my business suits and whatnot, and be that professional person that they know that they're going to be working with.
Mm-hmm.
And also, then by not having them in the home, then I don't have to worry about them falling and things like that, and having to make it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So 3 really good tips there. Talk to experts, have the right insurance, and maintain that professionality. Yeah. So before I move over to the other panelists, I do have one more question that I want to fit in before we head off from our listeners on Twitter. So this is a question about employing your first few staff. So is it reasonable to have your first few staff members work from your home office? And if so, do you have any tips for supporting the transition between to your home office for new staff?
I'm not going to weigh in on that one because I will never have staff.
Okay.
I think it's very legit. I think it's very, very legitimate. Like I say, I have staff that work from home, and they absolutely love it. And I think it's made them even more appreciative of their position because they don't have to put their dogs in daycare anymore. You know, if a kid is off sick, they'll trade a shift, as Jack calls it. If that's what they need to do, they'll have that flexibility. It's such a growing way to work these days. It's becoming more and more the norm. You are a completely legitimate business when you work from home. You have to think of yourself as such, and then other people will think of yourself as in that way too. I could just name so many companies that all their staff are remote and they all work from home. The coffee shop, the cottage, Jamaica, wherever it is that they want to work from. You know, and I do that. I take my show on the road. I go out for weekends with my barbershop group, and I take my work with me. You know, and we tend to have our contest and convention at the end of April, and I'll be sitting there doing somebody's final year end or something like that just before we go on stage. And it means that I can be flexible and I can still do that kind of thing. It's perfectly okay to accept the same for your staff. You can keep on top of them through Google Hangouts, through sharing screens on Skype and things like that. All of our stuff's stored on the cloud anyway, so I can see what they're doing. Where it's all online, it's all cloud technology. So many ways to keep in touch now.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And it is 1 o'clock, so I'm going to give each of our other panelists 30 seconds to give us one final tweetable tip on home-based entrepreneurship. So, Elaine, I'll have you do your quick tip now, if you have one.
I think I just gave it, really. I think I've given all the tips that I have.
That was a good one. That was a great one. Edwin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Quick tip, since I was here and had mic trouble, invest in a good headset. Reach that out, invest in a good headset.
That's a great one. I hope you'll take that one for our next our next startup school. JF.
I don't know. I'm going to say probably get an HD webcam. Would be the one that I've just figured out today. But yeah, I think it's come up a few times, and that is the having the separate space has huge advantages. Not just even if you don't have clients around, what you gain in terms of the ability to get kind of your life not invading your personal life will not invade your business as much, and your business will not invade your personal life as much. So that's a critical thing, and you know, if you're still on that corner of the kitchen table, I don't know, get a curtain. Take like a little cardboard thing that separates that part of the kitchen table from the rest. Like whatever you can do, like I said, like taking the walk first or hitting the coffee shop and coming back was a great idea too.
I like it. Awesome. All good tips. So, Mike, you have the last word.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I would just say, you know, from an insurance perspective, it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be expensive. In fact, if you find the right company, it should be pretty darn simple and affordable. And I would just say, in today's day and age, get yourself insured. It'll save you in the long run. I appreciate Startup Canada for having us on today. And thanks to the rest of the panel for being with me here today.
All of our panel, your lunch hour on Startup School with Startup Canada Live community leader. Please be sure to join for our next episode of Startup. You can register for that at startupcan.ca/event when we discuss the Friday's Canada Days, so we our startup chats until next one. Canadian weekend celebrating celebrating our Canadian entrepreneurship with the 2016 Startup Canada Awards. You can nominate or apply until July 20th at startupaward.ca. So thank you again to everyone for joining us, to all of our wonderful panelists. I hope you have an enterprising week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.